Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Central. Broadcasting live from the bottom left-hand corner of the Nevada Triangle in a city called Fresno, California. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Central. My name is Jeffrey Gonzalez. I am your host for the show. I'm also the founder of the group called the Sanger Paranormal Society. Been investigating the paranormal going over 14 years. So I'm just not up here talking about it. I'm actually living it. I've got a team. One of those dudes is sitting right there, Mr. Alan Thomas.
Hi, y'all. Y'all looking good. I can see you from here.
Bringing us in with the music, the tunes, on the keys, Mr. Ryan Bardellis, better known as Neon the Unknown. We are broadcasting live HD quality video using the Mevo, provided to us by Livestream. HD quality, Sundays at 6 o'clock p.m. Every Sunday at 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, California time. We're broadcasting in a little tiny location in Fresno, California. Where are we located? I'm not going to tell you because people want to kill us.
Yeah, we're like on the third rock from the sun.
So, you already know where we broadcast, so who cares, right? Who cares? So, tonight we have a fun show. Now, let's hope he remembers. For those who were with us last time, Mr. Grand Cameron forgot about us. Something happened and he goofed up with the time, but 6:30, we're going to have him on, and by telephone, and we're going to talk UFOs and top secret stuff about Trump. And so let's hopefully I got my big screen here. We're supposed to do it Skype, but because of the camera equipment that we have, you really can't see his face, so we're just going to have him audio, which is fine. You know, there's really nothing for him to show at this point in time. So we'll just have the audio on, and I'll call him via telephone, and he's in Canada. Yes, he is in Canada. So hopefully Grant will remember at 6:30, and hopefully he'll send me over his number so we can call him. So, all right. Well, yes, then he knows. I know where you are. Hey, don't tell anybody. All right. Let's start off by telling everybody something extremely exciting happened to us last Monday. And I've kept it hush-hush on the internet for a reason. Because this is something that is so unbelievable, and it has nothing to do with TV or the internet show. We are talking monsters? We are talking, we know what it is.
It's monsters.
Okay, all right, and
monsters.
And it's happening so close to where we live is un-effing believable.
Like 4 minutes from my house. Literally 4 minutes.
Okay.
Scary, huh?
It's, how do I explain this? Okay, I'm going to tell you the full story. And we're going to get the guy who called me in the studio. We're actually going to shoot for an episode for TV. But last night, when did we go? Friday night, Saturday night, Friday night.
It was last night.
It was last night?
Yeah.
Okay, last night.
No, was it last night?
No, not the Fresno Tunnels. Huh? Last night or the night before? I think it was the night before. Night before. Yeah, night before.
Night before.
Friday night. Right, we went out. Before. Okay, let me tell you guys what happened. This is absolutely freaking remarkable. All right? I got a call Monday of last week. This past Monday. This gentleman with the owner of what he does. What they do is, for all those who live out in the country, the ranchers, people have cheap goats, and what they do is they go place them in areas where the owners of certain ranches have high weed and they want to get rid of them. So what they do is they fence in a bunch of sheep and lambs and goats, and they let them feast on all of the, basically a lawnmower is what they do. It's what these guys are. They're a lawnmower. And so they had on this property, And I'm going to tell you what street this is on for all those who live in the areas where we live. This is going to frickin' blow your mind. Herndon Avenue. Okay? Now, we're not talking on the other side of Academy towards the east. We're talking towards the Clovis Community Hospital. Okay, you guys ready for this? So, they placed approximately 29 to 30 goats in this property in front of a house. We're talking maybe a quarter of an acre, half an acre maybe. And they've been there for 6 months, but they've been realizing that the herd has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They've been going, what the hell's going on here? Now, the fence around this place is 6 feet. Regular fencing. We're not talking barbed wire. We're talking chain link fence around this property.
And the gate's always closed.
Right.
Always.
Yes. Okay, so they had 29 and they have taken some to auction, but they've lost 14. 14 of these goats have disappeared. All right, so the guy who works for the owner happens to be Native American, half Mexican. All right, so he was noticing this, and he's going, "What happened?" And this is his wording: "What's happening to my babies? Where are they going?" Until one day they found a dead one on the property, and it was a small one. We're talking, it was about this big, right? So it was maybe
about 40 pounds.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they walked up to it and they realized that the stomach had been opened up and organs have been removed, which to them was extremely odd because this is on a property in front of a house. You would have thought that if this goat was making enough noise that they, the owners would have came out to see what was going on. But when I say the organs were removed, we're talking the heart, liver, kidneys, and 2 other ones I don't remember.
The lungs.
The lungs?
Yeah,
okay.
it ate the lungs. Can you believe that?
Okay,
Lungs?
so we're talking 4 or 5 of the organs were removed, but it looks like they were eaten. So in other words, whatever this thing was, it turned the goat on its back, placed its hand on the neck, grabbed its stomach, and went. Okay, so, and another strange thing is there's no blood
None.
around the carcass. I took pictures of underneath. It was so dry. There's nothing there.
You know what? And I walked all around. It's not a really big property, a couple of acres, right there in the front. And there was no blood anywhere. Like when you kill something, like and you gut it like that.
Oh yeah, blood can go everywhere.
It makes a nice big puddle of blood. There was no puddles of blood at all. And it was eating all the organ meat only. It left the backstrap. It left the rump
left the
rows.
bile duct. It left the poisons in the body. It knew what to take. Now you guys doing okay? So it was a human being. Well, not exactly. So another time, they went to go look at the herd, and they noticed some more were missing. But they also noticed one of the mamas, goats or lambs, was behind a tree, and it was just staying there. So they went towards it to walk up to it, and usually, they sometimes even in a small property like that, they get scared and they'll run off. Well, this one did not run off. The mama didn't. And as they got closer to it, they noticed it had a bite mark on it, and it was a serious bite mark on it. So they tended to it, and they took it back to the owner's property, which is maybe about 5 miles down the road, and they put it in a area where it had hay to try to comfort it and stuff. But it died the following day. The mama did. So I guess the mama was trying to protect one of the young ones that disappeared. So Richard, the guy who called, since it was dead, decided to investigate the bite mark. And he noticed that the bite mark, you know, if you were to bite into an apple per se, you have these two, what do you call these teeth here?
Incisors.
Incisors, okay. They're usually, for a human, they're about 3 fingers wide. He was able to measure the bite on this lamb, which was a whole hand. The incisors were the length of 8 inches to 6 inches. That's how big the bite mark was on this thing.
Isn't that like how big the mouth was on the Bigfoot?
On the windows, 8 inches lips. Okay.
So I've been hearing this for 2 days or so, and then I just barely put that together.
No, I said that. I mentioned it. I said it's the same distance of my windows of the lips.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So. What? So I took pictures of this. Obviously, the dead goat that was on the property. You know, took pictures. So I told Richard. I go, Richard. And you guys all know we've been talking about Bigfoot for years and years and years, and we know how they travel, what they use to travel in canals, dry canals, because these Bigfoots are so tall, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet tall, that if they were to be walking on the dirt or on the street or just on the ground, it's, you know, you could see these things because they're so tall. So what better way to move around is to be moving around in the ground, dug up, you know what I'm saying? So in other words, these dry creeks or canals that don't have water is like a perfect place for them to be walking and hunched over, so then nobody can see you from above. So I asked Richard, I go, Richard, is there a canal, a creek anywhere near this place? And we're there at the property, right? And he goes, yeah, there's one about half a mile east of Herndon. Now, mind you, Richard, he doesn't drive. He doesn't own a car. He takes the bus everywhere, and his boss picks him up sometimes. So he didn't realize anything about the canals and stuff. Now, the reason why, let's go back to the very beginning. The reason why he called me in the first place is
only like they're asking on here. Okay, the one that was at the house, it didn't have any blood, but it was eaten and killed and everything right there.
Right.
It wasn't taken anywhere and brought back.
Right.
It was killed right there. The mama one, same. Okay, it was right there.
Yes.
And that was the only, they only found like a few dead ones. All the rest of them were just disappearing.
They were gone, correct.
And then this is where...
Actually, I think this is the only one they found.
Well, they found the one that had the stomach and the intestines were ripped out, not eaten.
But that's the one we found. That's the one we saw, right?
Yeah, and he said that it ripped the intestines and stomach in half and threw them like that. Like what and Richard's own words, like, what kind of strength does it take to rip intestines and stomach like that? But just like rip it in half. I can't do it. Me and Jeff would tug or war with that. You couldn't do that.
Yeah. So,
and then this is where we decided, like, you were go out looking.
Well, yeah, but before that, how did Richard get a hold of us? Why did Richard get a hold of us? Well, he saw, just so happens that the week after we had Bigfoot Joe in here, the CW network here in Fresno, California, decided to rerun Bigfoot Joe's episode for the CW. Coincidence? I don't think so. And Richard was watching that and realizing he's talking about Bigfoot on the valley floor. So he goes, who in the hell are these guys? Meaning us. He's never heard of us, had no idea that we even existed in this world. Decided to ask somebody, and they go, yeah, that's, Paranormal Central, Sanger Paranormal Society. So he did some investigating, got my number off the internet, and called me. That's how we became in contact with him. So now we are there on location. And I asked him, a creek, where, a canal, where? And he said, there's one half a mile that way. So I said, let's go. Because I wanted to go look and see if there's any footprints in the canal and the dry creek, because I had no idea what type of canal or creek this was. So we jump in my truck and we head over there. And I'm driving really slow, and I said, hey, let's get out and look around. And Richard goes, yeah, let's do it. And so did Alan. And Alan's there with us. And So I park the vehicle. We get out. We walk on the other side of the canal. Nothing. I walk underneath. There's like a tube tunnel underneath. Very cool in there too. It's like 20 degrees difference from outside in there. Like it's very, very cool, temperature wise. And so we end up at that location where the canal is at, and Herndon Avenue. There's a bunch of eucalyptus trees. And I said, you know, the cases that we've investigated down on the valley floor always involve a canal, always involve a marshy area. There's a word I've been trying to get into to call this like this area, not like an island,
You mean like the little wooded area?
Yeah, what do you call those places? I mean,
oh, I just call it like a wild area.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it's wild.
Okay.
It's not.
It's just imagine a bunch of trees, bushes, weeds, like a
wild area.
Yeah, okay.
And it's probably only like 4 acres at the most.
That's smaller than that. The wild area?
Yeah.
Oh no, we're talking maybe 2 acres, an acre and a half. It was small, dude.
Yeah,
It's small. It's small.
Yeah.
It's very, very small. So
It is
Oh,
small.
no,
Hard
oasis.
to-
Thank you, pseudonym. Oasis. That's the word I've been trying to find forever. Oasis. Thank you. Oh my God, and I can sleep tonight.
See, it doesn't seem like an oasis to me.
Well,
That's why I
well,
didn't think of it.
And the reason why I'm saying
There was
oasis.
no girls in bikinis. You know.
Yeah. So okay. So we are walking out in that area. Why is this mic all of a sudden trying to? And I'm walking ahead of Richard and Alan because they're talking, you know, their
We're
lingo.
tracking, yeah.
They're tracking. They're talking their lingo, and I just want to start looking around. I'm not expecting to find anything. Again, we are half a mile from the location where these goats have been disappearing from, and half a mile is a long ways, you guys. Okay, so we're walking around, and oh, there's his phone number. Woohoo! That's Grant Cameron. Okay, we got his phone number. All right, so I start walking around and I start to smell something. Death. I smell death. And then Alan and Richard started to smell it. And I'm going, okay, where's it coming from? And we started to look around, and all of a sudden,
We literally sniffed this one out, man.
we
Literally.
found a dead goat.
It was like a tall one.
This
it
is the
wasn't
big
a little
goat.
one.
This
It
is
was
the-
a big one.
This is the big goat, guys. This is like a 120 pounder. It was killed the same way as the other goat was on the property. All right? Think about that. We are half a mile away. And then we find this dead goat where just by luck, I decided to check the spot area out. Why? Because it fits the criteria of Bigfoots when they're in that area. This is what we look for. And we found a goat, and guess what? The stomach was also ripped out. Organs were missing. But check this out. The neck on this goat was twisted, and the legs were broken.
They were broken, and one was kind of wrapped around the other one like a pretzel.
Yep.
And it was twisted all the way around like a bread tie, like, you know. And I mean, it was twisted like that. And then right at the base of the skull, the head was twisted all the way where it was looking behind it, but only the rest of the spine wasn't twisted, just only right there at the skull it was broke. Kind of like, what kind, and it was big fat, like what kind of strength would it take to do that?
Okay, now for all those Bigfooters out there who know Bigfoot, who know that they like deer, they like meat, what do they do? I've heard, and I've never seen it, but I've heard that when they kill a deer, they break the legs.
They ripped
And
the leg off, one leg.
They rip it off or break it, and they put it on a tree, kept alive to preserve the meat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this goat was killed the same way. So what do you think did that to this goat? It wasn't a human. It wasn't. There's no homeless people out there.
And no blood again.
And no blood again.
And all the meat was there.
Oh, absolutely, we have pictures, you guys.
do.
We have pictures.
We just can't share them on here yet.
Yeah. So, but check it out. So I decided that I'm going back out there tonight to get the goat, and I'm going to bring it back home to the studio, and I'm going to try to preserve it. Granted, we took the film crew out there last night or the night before, and we filmed it all, and blew the camera crew away because they saw the legs broken, they saw the neck twisted, and they're going, "What the WTF?"
And it has the stink that stays in your nose for a whole day.
Okay, so I don't know. I gotta find a suitcase so I can put it in. It's a very large animal, so I'm gonna see if I can preserve it and put it in the backyard someplace. Because what I want to do is I want to physically come in here and show it to you. I'm gonna hold it and I'm gonna show it to you. Okay. This is good. This is good stuff. Now, so I decided to do some more investigating on that canal where we found this goat, and I started backtracking the creek canal, which I don't want to tell them what the name is because then people are going to know, but it happens to connect to the same canal where Bigfoot Joe and those two boys saw their Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Are you shitting me?
And we also, like, three years ago, had a report of, remember the farm labor guys were saying that there was something growling at them in the creek that was behind their house, remember?
Yeah.
That's not far from that.
Do you remember also the two girls who saw the Bigfoot near Academy? We went out there.
Yeah.
That canal right there also, I think it's the same one. Dog Creek, it looks like. What the hell? Man, you are good. Who in the hell is that? Pseudo. That guy Nam picked it out. Dog Creek. That's where we found it. You are good. You are a son of a bitch.
Yeah, it is Dog Creek.
Yeah, you got it, dude. You are. He must be from around the area, obviously.
And that when I saw the name of it, it was like, why do they call it Dog Creek? Because I
know it's not Avocado Lake, you guys. Digger Dog. It's not Avocado Lake.
And I was like, I'm not even sure if it was a Bigfoot, because Bigfoot leaves blood. This is the first time I ever seen a kill without blood.
But the bite mark with the size of the hand.
See, that's
big, dude.
Like a dog man.
Why would they name that creek Dog Creek?
Yeah.
Dun. Think about that, guys. Why would they name that creek Dog Creek?
And now, that's the other thing. Like the owners and everybody, they're saying it was a dog. Dogs did it.
Dog.
Okay, like I was raised in the hills, and I know what dogs do. Like even cows or horses, they bite the nose off and they rip the ears off, and then usually it's like a pack of dogs. So one of them is harassing the animal, goat, whatever, and it's ripping the ears and nose off, while the ones behind it are nipping its butt, and they usually take it down like that. The ones from behind take it down, and the other ones are ripping its ears and nose while it's, keeping it its attention on the one in the front of them, while the other ones kill it. Okay, this one had its ears intact, not a scratch on the nose or anything, so it was not dogs. Okay, not dogs. Not dogs. And maybe dog man, but not dogs. Just for the ones that will think it's a dog that did it. Not dogs. In fact, we up in where I lived at, up in the hills, we had cows that we found like that, and their ears and everything were ripped off, and that's how we knew it was dogs, pack of dogs. And these are not. And this is like this last night we went in there, I actually thought we were being watched.
Right.
And I didn't tell anyone, and there's oranges all around it. And I was gonna walk in. It had just rained since the last time we were out there. It rained a little bit, so the ground was perfectly pristine. There was no prints, no tire tracks, no anything. And I thought, oh man, I could walk out there and I could find prints and maybe I could figure out like what it is. I got like 2 rows in, and that was as far as I was going in that orange.
All right.
I did not go any further.
Okay, we are going to stop right there, and we're going to go ahead and call Grant Cameron. So let's do this.
Iceman creatures were drinking the blood of a killed deer? Huh.
Grant here.
Grant, how's it going? This is Jeffrey.
Hi, Grant.
Yeah, not too bad.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay, I just got to turn your volume up here. I can't hear you very well.
Uh-oh. Can you hear it now? Are we all right?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
You can. Uh-oh, that's not good. Why can you not barely hear us? Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2.
Okay, that should be good enough. I can sort of hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, yeah, I could hear him.
Yeah, let me lower the volume down a little bit, but we're okay. Yeah, okay, well, thank you, Grant. We had you on last year. I believe it was last year or 2 years ago. It was quite a bit ago, and I appreciate it. You have a book out. Tell us about this book now. It's called Charlie Red Star, right?
Yeah, Charlie Red Star. This is a book that I actually wrote about 1976, 1977, and it details the story of how I got dragged down the rabbit hole of UFOs. And that happened in 1975. I really didn't have, that I can recall, any interest in UFOs. I was interested in sort of paranormal stuff. I was interested in Edgar Cayce. I was interested, I'd done a study at the hospitals on near-death experiences and people dying and things people see as they're dying. And that was when near-death experiences first started. But I had no interest in UFOs. And what happened is there was a small town, I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is just north of the North Dakota border. And there was a small town by the name of Carmen where these UFOs were being seen like almost nightly. It was just like a deluge of sightings. And so I said to my friend, we used to drive around the big city, and I said, why don't we go and see what I was looking at? And my friend, who I still have coffee with every week on Saturdays, said, okay, we'll drive out there. And we never did. This is February of 1975. And then what happens is, in May of 1975, there's a local TV affiliate here of the CTV network, television network in Canada. They're trying to film this. All the TV stations are out there trying to film this thing, and they almost get it on film, aren't able to. They send another crew out the next night, and the guy, they set it up. The thing is on the ground. It appears to be on the ground, and they send two cars, one north of it, one south of it, to try to sort of surround it. The camera stays at the end of the road, and one of the cars comes up on this thing, and it's sitting in a field, and it's on an angle. It's sitting like a movie screen. It's on an angle up into the air like a movie screen. It's 50 feet high, it's blood red, but it's not touching the ground. And they look, and they're just, I couldn't believe it. It's sitting behind this bunch of trees. So it's in the middle, it's not in the middle of the night, but it's dark. So they're looking around to get their perspective of where they are on the countryside, because there's really no, major towns or anything. And they look back, and this thing is gone. And meanwhile, down at the end of the road, 8.25 miles away, this guy is looking at this thing. And I didn't realize this until like 40 years later. The guy is looking through the camera, and they hadn't got it the night before. So he wants to get something on film. So he sees this thing that glows up, and it goes back down, and it glows up, and it goes back down. And he said, okay, next time it glows up, I'm going to shoot. And it was almost like the UFO said, okay, you ready? And so this thing started to glow up, and he pushes the trigger on this big TV camera, and the thing jumps in the air. And then he tracks this thing as it goes across the sky, and they end up having this very, very famous film. It's called the CKY film. And the only place you can really see this film is in a documentary called UFO Cover-Up Live, which was done in 1988. All the films, I had a copy of the film. Mine disappeared. All the copies disappeared. And the guy who took the film really wasn't paid for it to start with. He was not really a film guy. He was a film editor. And so when he left the TV station, he basically took the film with him. And so there are no real copies that I know of that are still around, but this is in this documentary where they show this film. So anyway, they do this film, and then it goes viral in the city where I'm at. The story is just viral. And I say, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. So we go to this town, and I always describe it. It's like you buy the lottery ticket, and you know there's a chance you're going to win, but you know you're not going to win. And it was that sort of thing. It was like, we're going to go, we're not going to see it. Everybody else is going to see it, but we're not going to see it. We went out there, we drove in this town, out of town, in the town, out of town. We're driving around, and we don't know what we're looking at or what everybody's describing, and we're looking at stars and planets and whatever. And I really have no background in astronomy, so I really don't know what they're looking at. And I said, whatever it is, it's not very, very cool. So my friend Larry says, okay, we'll drive back into town one more time. We don't see anything. Let's go home. I said, fantastic. This is a total waste of time. So we make this turn. We're coming east. We're east of the town. We're turning. We go back west, going back into the town, and the thing appeared from the left to the right. And I always describe to people, there are only three things in life. There is belief, disbelief, and knowing. If you have not seen anything, you can just believe or disbelieve. And a lot of people throw that in and think it's evidence. Like they'll say, oh, I think it was a weather balloon, I think it was this, I think it was that. If you have not seen it, you do not know. All you're doing is basically, to me, just hashing out religious belief or some sort of concept that you've got as to what's going on in the world. If you see it, you know. So when this thing appeared from the left to the right, it was down very low. It was right in front of the car. This was not a light in the sky. This was an object down low in front of the car. Came from the left to the right. It was bobbing up and down. It wasn't moving in a straight line. It was sort of moving up and down like a bobber on a fishing line. It was blood red. It was a plasma type object, so it was very, very brilliantly bright, very, very slowly pulsing. And in the car, nobody said, "Is that what they're looking at? I wonder if that's what they're looking at." Everybody just went, "There it is!" Everybody instantly knew this is what they were talking about. It was just so bizarre. And it flew right in front of the car, and it was down very low. 100 feet, maybe not even that. It was moving very slow. I mean, way slower than a plane, almost even slower in a car. And so I was jumping out of the car as the car was moving because it was going in behind a set of school buses that were parked outside of this town. And I remember running through the parking lot because I wanted to see this thing because it was going behind the school buses. And I just watched this thing sort of pulse and fly off as if it was doing nothing. Just flew off into the distance. Dragged all my friends out 2 nights later. The second night came right at us. Again, it was in close, and my life changed. I mean, I just sort of fell off the edge of the earth. I wanted to know why nobody was investigating this thing. This just blew me away. I dragged all my friends out there, and the second night, they didn't stay. They ended up going back before this thing appeared. I was telling people, man, this will change your life. I just couldn't believe that there was actually something like this because it's just a theory until you actually see it.
Right.
And I put all the manuscript together, and I went and interviewed all these people. Nobody wanted to be interviewed, and the object was called Charlie Red Star. And the town, they actually gave this thing a name. It was there so much, and half the people in the town had seen this thing, and nobody wanted to talk about it. But I would say, well, you saw something, and wow, who said that? Who said I saw something? And then you'd talk to him, and eventually the guy would tell you what happened. He said, well, I was the only one that saw it, And he'd give you 4 or 5 names of other people who had seen this thing. And I had this huge list of people, and I documented all this stuff. And then I tried to get published. This is about 1977. I tried to get this published with all these sightings and what people saw, and some very bizarre stuff. And what I had, because I had maybe had 100 sightings in the 2 years that it was there, and documented all this stuff. And in Toronto, the big publishing place in Canada, people looked at it, but they didn't publish it. And the local publisher here should have published it. And I remember she changed my life. She wrote me back the rejection letter and said, "Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers." And I was, wow, I could not believe it. So what I basically did is I gave the manuscript. I didn't even remember writing the manuscript. I gave it to my sister. And my sister's sort of like the hoarder, historical person, and it gets everything. So she's got it, and like 35 years later, she comes to me and says, "Oh, remember this?" And she gives me this manuscript. I'm looking at this thing. And I remember writing something. I never realized I wrote the whole thing. And so I went, wow, it's like, wow, it's this whole manuscript. And so, because then you could digitally, the optical scanners, you could digitally reproduce stuff. So then I put it on digital, and I sort of played around with it for a while. And then I started to understand some of the important things that I'd missed. The fact that there was a nuclear weapon connection to this thing. And it was at that point that a producer in Canada picked up the option, read the story, and picked up the option for a movie. And she wanted it published through a publisher. And so I publish all my own books, but this one, because it's so expensive to ship books in Canada, I figured nobody would ever read it unless it went through a publisher and it was in bookstores, so people in this small town in the city where I live could actually read it. So that's what happened. It's now being published. I think it comes out in the States on September the 5th or something, and it's coming out next week in Canada. But it's the most popular book I have. I mean, everybody is like even my friends and relatives. They don't want to read the other books. They're interested in stories, and there's some pretty bizarre stories in there. And so it's a pretty popular book, and it basically tells the story of this town that was inundated, and it also gets into some of the other stuff that I linked in 35 years later. Like, for example, all along the Canadian-U.S. border. Like, I live right on the U.S. border. 1975, and people may not remember this, this is the Vietnam War. My first sighting took place 2 weeks after the end of the Vietnam War. And later in that year, all the U.S. Air Force Northern Tier Air Force bases along the border, where they keep all the nuclear weapons, all the SOC bases, like Loring Air Force Base, Worth Smith Air Force Base on Michigan border, Minot, which is just south of me, Malmstrom Air Force Base, all these bases in 1975 in November all had UFOs inside the weapons storage area where the nuclear weapons were. And it was that sort of led me to this fact that this may be tied in, because the sightings were not only in Manitoba, where I live, they were all through Minnesota. Wisconsin had so many, the CIA actually sent two officers there to investigate what was going on in Wisconsin. Ontario, all along the Canadian-U.S. border, all this stuff was happening. And I later on made this connection that what happened in my case was that in 1975, in February, when these sightings started in Manitoba, if you know the whole story of Star Wars, during the Reagan administration, Reagan had put this stuff in outer space, and they were going to shoot down the Russian missiles as they launched. But prior to that, they had actually put in North Dakota, starting in February of 1975, 100 nuclear missiles. There was 5 megaton ones that would try to get the Russian missile when it was in outer space. Then these little Sprint 1 megaton missiles, if they missed it there, they would try to get it as it was coming in. Because most people don't realize that the number one target of the Russian missiles is not Washington, it's not LA, and it's not New York City. It's the missiles in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, because if you don't take out the missiles, you aren't going to see what happens to Washington or anything like that. So that's the number one target. And so they had put in these 100 new nuclear missiles in 1975 at a town called Nakoma, North Dakota, which is just on the other side of the border. And as soon as they put them in, the UFO started on our side of the border. And when they started taking them out in November, they negotiated with the Russians. They started taking these missiles out in November of 1975. The sightings went down in 1975. And I talked to Bob Deemert, who was the guy who owned the airport in Carmen, who had the most sightings. I said, Bob, how many sightings do you have? He said, about 150, because he was sort of like the tour guide. People would come in, the TV crews, and he would tell them where it comes from, how it moves around, whatever. And I said, how many sightings have you had since 1976? Absolutely none. Has not had a sighting since. So it was there for a year, year and a half. It was like the CIA put drugs in the water and then pulled the drugs out, and it all just went away. And so what I basically did is I documented the story and then sort of lost the manuscript for 35 years. My sister gave it back to me, and now we're republishing it. And this basically sets me up on how I got involved. So I get rejected by a publisher. She basically tells me, this thing's never going to get published, get lost. And then I had this, because as I said, when I saw my first UFO, I fell off the edge of the earth. The other people who were in the car with me were really not affected. They just went on with their life. I couldn't believe I'd seen this thing. And so when I got rejected by the publisher, all I was interested in is, what did I see? Somebody in the world has to know what that thing was. And that's why I went to the Canadian government. Then I went and chased the former president of Penn State University around for 8 years. I headed a team of investigators who tried to get him to talk. And that led to the President of the United States. And now, in the last year, I've spent almost all my time chasing high-level intelligence officials, because I firmly believe that there are 6 teams who have been initiated to get this story out. And it started in about January of 2016. And that's the story I wrote a book called, it's been out for a couple months now, but called Managing Magic, which basically says that this phenomena is more magic than it is UFO. It involves all sorts of paranormal phenomena. It's all connected. It's all the same thing. And that I go through and show that in the United States, it's the only place it happens. It doesn't happen in any other country in the world. It just happens in the United States. That the American officials, intelligence officials, have been leaking this story for 70 years. And they want you to know what's going on, but they don't want you access to the classified material, like the nuclear weapons stuff, the energy stuff, all that kind of stuff. But the story they want out. And so in this book called Managing Magic, I go through 70 years of U.S. history, and I show they talked to Disney, they got a documentary, they talked to my friend Bob Ebeneger in the 70s, they did the documentary, then they went back to him in the 80s, they wanted to do another documentary, and the whole thing is, if there's nothing to it, why are you talking to people?
Right.
Because there's only three options. People can say they're covering up, and I say, no, they're not covering up. Because if you wanted to cover up, you'd do what all the other almost 200 nations in the world have done. You would just shut up and quit talking about it, and the story would go away. You can't say you're covering up and then continue to leak stuff to people and keep the story going, keep throwing gas on the glowing embers. So they're not covering up, and they're not disclosing. If they wanted to disclose, they would get the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News, and they'd get them all together and have a news conference. They'd show them the bodies, they'd show them the crafts. So they're not disclosing either.
No.
And the same thing with the aliens. The aliens, or whoever they are not disclosing either. They could land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. Everybody's doing this sort of gradual acclimatization thing, this sort of raising of consciousness. And so that's what I spend most of my time now on. And I chase primarily, the main person I'm chasing, or I'm just following what he's doing, is a man by the name of Dr. Ronald Pandolfi, who was sort of known as the head scientist of the CIA. He's been in charge of the UFO subject for the White House since 1983. Potentially has briefed the last 6 presidents on this subject, and he's busy leaking this story. And so I get into what the story's about, why he's leaking it, and what's going on. So that's a long answer to your very short question.
Now, so you're saying that our government, or whoever's in charge, is letting the information out slowly but surely. Obviously, in movies, we've been talking about this subject matter, about these cool movies, Men in Black, Close Encounters, Fifth Element. We're talking recent movies. There's a little bit of truth in a lot of these movies that are coming out, and we're catching it. Now, I believe disclosure will never happen, and I'll tell you why. Because if they finally come out and say, this is for real, then the subject matter that you're into is paranormal. That we're talking that includes a lot of stuff. We're talking ghosts, aliens, UFOs, lots of monsters, Bigfoot. If the aliens and UFOs are real and they've been keeping it hidden from us, then what about all the other stuff? Okay.
Yeah, it's all the same thing. That's why I called it magic. It's managing magic. If you look at Ron Pandolfi, who's this key CIA guy, he starts leaking it to a guy by the name of Dan Smith in 1991. And the first thing he says to him is, we have a phenomenology problem. So if you look at the CIA and you look at, they're the main guys who are doing the releases. They're controlling these 6 teams that are putting this stuff out. The word is used there is phenomenology. So if you see when Obama, 2 days before Obama leaves the White House, he allows this 12 million pages or whatever to come onto the internet. And so it involves not only UFOs, but it involves remote viewing, because it's all the same thing. And that's where I get into, I had a download experience. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I had this download experience in 2012 where I was basically given the answer that I was asking for in 1975. What is going on? What is this object? And it was basically the idea that this is all consciousness, that the ground of being is consciousness. It's not matter, it's consciousness. And as Ben Rich said in 1993 when he was giving this lecture to UCLA, he said, we've discovered the mistake in the equation. And I say the mistake in the equation is that it's a consciousness-based universe. It's not matter. As long as you believe that matter is primary and that we're random particles floating around on a meaningless time and space, you will never solve this thing. It's not until you understand that consciousness is the ground of being and that everything is consciousness and matter is secondary, then you start to understand what they're doing. So this is when Ben Rich was asked, how do they get here? How does it work? By Jan Hartson, who's now the international director for MUFON. And Jan Hartson had this experience when he was 9 years old or whatever in the backyard, close encounter with this flying saucer in the backyard. He's fascinated, and he wants to to back engineer UFOs, him and his brother. So he asked Ben Ritchie, Ben, I've been tossing it my whole life. How does it work? How do they get here? And Ben turns around and looks at him and says, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan was shocked. He said, well, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben said, that's how it works. And that is how it works. We were told 2 years before that, 1991, by Dr. Eric Walker. He was being questioned about the control group. Is it still 12 people? Is it all Americans? And he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy who was asking the question had no idea. So Walker answered his own question. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. So you have these two high-level officials, and Walker was even higher-level official than Ben Rich. He was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, which is where DARPA came from, which is where the Jasons came from. He was on the board of directors, done engineering studies for Eisenhower, 16 years as president of Penn State University, 14 honorary doctorate degrees, and said he knew the MJ-12 people. He'd known them for 40 years, since 1947. Leave it alone, there's nothing you can do. You're up against the windmills. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you're wasting your time. You're never going to solve this thing. So it was this idea that this consciousness is basic, and that's only one reason. In the book Managing Magic, I describe 64 reasons why they will not disclose unless they're forced to disclose. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get us to do the disclosure. They're leaking us material to try to get the questions asked of them. And there's a number of examples. Stephen Greer was one where Stephen he claimed that he had gotten some material through to a friend of Bill, and Bill goes and contacts Clinton, and the message comes back, I can't do it, but you can. And I've heard this over and over and over again through the years. They want us. Hillary Clinton is another example. Hillary Clinton answered talked about UFOs on every occasion she's been asked. She's never lied about it. She's never beat around the bush about this kind of stuff, but she has never brought up the subject. She's only answered questions. And it's that kind of thing where they want you to ask the questions. So there's just piles of reasons, but the main reason I think that they don't want it released and they will never be disclosure is because it's basically suicide, the president committing suicide on national TV. Most people think that there's some dark, evil cabal, some Wizard of Oz that's running the show. And I say, after looking at the presidents for 30 years, absolutely not. The president is the Wizard of Oz. The president is running the cover-up. The president is in charge. He's in control of all secrecy, which most people don't realize. Top secret, confidential, secret, all the code names, the compartmentalization stuff. That's all executive order. That's all run out of the executive office of the president. That's not done by law. The president set the whole thing up. So the president isn't on top of that whole thing. And if you suddenly realize that the president is running the cover-up, then you spill the milk. And they're so afraid in government to lose control of the situation. Once you spill the milk, you cannot put it back in. And there's so many things that can go wrong that as Stephen Greer pointed out, politicians are gutless wonders. They will not do anything unless they're 100% sure that it's going to go right. And the problem with the president is that you can have anybody go down. You can have the Secretary of Defense go down, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor. You can have all those people go down. But if the president goes down, the country goes down. So there's always this plausible deniability. As much as they can prevent it, you will never link UFOs into the president. You will never link the president into the Russians. You'll never link the president into Iran-Contra. There's this plausible deniability. So that's why they always put out the thing, oh, the president's an idiot. He doesn't know what's going on about Russia or Iran-Contra or UFOs. He's just this idiot. And everybody else is running the show, and the president's just a puppet. And basically the fact is the president knows. And they're worried about things like the stock market, where you don't need people to panic. All you need is a bunch of computers who are ready to short the stock market, because that's where you make the money. And they suddenly realize that the price of oil and a bunch of other stuff is going down, and the computers kick in automatically, and they start shorting the stock market, and then a bunch of stop losses start clicking in, and the thing starts to spiral down. And that's the kind of stuff they're worried about, is how do you turn it around? Because in 9/11, they shut the stock market, and you were able to reopen the stock market because you were able to say, okay, anybody that gets on a plane and tries to hijack the plane, we're going to have marshals on the plane, and we're going to shoot them. And everybody goes, oh, okay, they got it under control. They've done something. There's nothing you can do about the UFO phenomenon. One of the people that's running one of these teams, his name is Jim Semivan. He is an experiencer, and this is what most people got to realize when you're talking about the government. If there's 10% experiencers in the general public, there's 10% experiencers in high-level government. And Jim Semivan is an experiencer. He's a former briefer for the President of the United States, high-level CIA guy. He had the beings in his room in the 1990s with his wife. Had a very dramatic experience. So he's an experiencer. He's leading one of these teams. He retired in 2008. That's when they briefed him. He could not be briefed while he was in the CIA, because that's white world. What they want is you in the black world CIA. So he retires. He goes under contract. Then they tell him what's going on. Then he starts to operate. He's the guy that's running. If you're familiar with the Tom DeLonge operation, he's in charge of the Tom DeLonge operation and the 10 people. And he's busy trying to get this story out. He was asked. The story I heard was by John Alexander. John will say this didn't happen, but John said, "Who's in charge? Who's running this thing?" And Semivan said clearly, "They are. We have no control over what they're doing. They are running the show. The stories are they've abducted the President of the United States." On 2 different stories that I've heard of. Semivan tells one of them. We don't know which president it was. The other one we know was supposedly Bill Clinton. But you hear stories of them abducting the Secretary General of the UN. This is a story that Bud Hopkins told. And you basically come to the understanding that they are running the show. They are shutting down nuclear missile silos. And that's why in 75, when they went above these nuclear missile silos, they were basically saying, we know what you're doing. And what I think happened, this is the way I describe it in Charlie Red Star, is that at the end of the Vietnam War, the Americans have lost. They've lost Cambodia, they've lost Laos, they've lost North Vietnam. And if you're as old as I am, you know that there was a thing called the domino theory. It was political domino theory, which was the idea that the Russians and the Chinese, that the countries were going to fall like dominoes, that eventually communism would rule the world. So you'd have this country, and then this country would fall, and more countries were falling to communism in the 1970s. So when they lost these 3 countries and they pulled all the troops out, now it was a situation where the Americans, who had all the power, had no troops in Southeast Asia. And they're sitting there wondering, after they lose Vietnam, are they going after South Korea? Are they going after the Philippines? Are they going after Indonesia? Which country are they going after next? And what are we going to do? And what I think happened was they started to think about the fact we may have to use nuclear weapons. If the Russians make a move on the Philippines or whatever, we're going to have to use the nuclear weapons because we don't have any troops on the ground. And the UFOs picked that up and suddenly appeared over all these missiles along the border and in North Dakota, where they had these new missiles they were putting in. And we started to learn this kind of stuff, that there's a big nuclear connection, that they don't like the nuclear thing. And the other thing was the cattle mutilation thing, where you take a look at cattle mutilations. If you look at a guy by the name of David Perkins, who apparently has the best catalog of cattle mutilation locations and stuff, 1975 was the highest rate of cattle mutilations they ever had, was 1975, the year when the Charlie Red Star thing happened and the nuclear weapon thing stuff. And Perkins says that all cattle mutilations, according to him, happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, from high, and especially he refers to a 1997 study that was done by the National Cancer Institute, where they take the map, they do it on above-ground nuclear testing east of the Rockies, and they look at all these hotspots of cancer breakouts in areas downwind from these nuclear tests. And Perkins says if you take that map of the cancers and you put them on top of the cattle mutilation map, it's a complete match. So you get these kind of things where in 1975 we didn't know what was going on, but now we're starting to sort of put the pieces together as to what might have been going on and why these things happen. That there's really nothing random. UFOs are not, that's one thing I've learned, they are not a random phenomenon. If you see a UFO, why do UFOs have lights on them? They have lights on them so you can see them. When they abduct people, you don't see anything. So when you see a UFO, They want you to see it. Otherwise, they could just cloak themselves like they do with UFOs. And you can see, you start seeing patterns of, why did I see this UFO? Why did I get dragged down this thing? It was almost like when they shot this camera, when this guy's shooting this film, and he said, the next time it glows up, I'm going to shoot. And as he pushes the trigger, the thing jumps. It was almost like they needed this to happen. That this was not a random event. This was not accidentally pushing the trigger at the same time this thing jumped. And you start seeing these kind of things where there's very little random going on. It's all almost like it's a pattern. It's like they've done it on 1,000 planets before. They are not doing the same thing. I've been in this rat hole or rabbit hole, whatever you want to call it, for so many years that I know that what happened now didn't happen then. It's almost like they're turning the pages of a book. First, they have the airships of the 1890s, and there are these wooden ships with propellers and stuff like that. And then you go to the Foo Fighters, and then you go to the Green Fireballs, and then you go to these Adamski-type crafts. Then you go to classic UFOs with windows. Then suddenly the windows disappear, and there's no window scene anymore, and you have these ground traces, and that goes on for 30 years. And then the ground traces stop. They haven't been ground traces for 20 years. And then you start getting triangles, and it's almost like they're turning the pages of a book. Okay, we'll do this now, and you say, well, where are the Foo Fighters? Well, they're on another planet 100 years behind us, and they're doing the same thing there that they did 100 years ago or 75 years ago here. And so I'm pretty confident in sort of what I see now, and particularly in the fact that the government there are people in the government, and most people don't realize that there are very high-level people in the government who are experiencers, who are determined they're going to try to get this out for whatever reason. I'm not sure what it is. But in the last 2 years, they are pushing. There are these 6 teams that are trying to get this story out through movies, through people talking, like Ron Pandolfi has a go-to meeting. Actually, his wife is running it. His wife's a scientist as well. His wife runs it, and they have this out on the open, and they're talking about this portal thing, which is extremely important. The idea that there's a portal, that we back-engineered the portal, there's these actuators, and they go through these great details on these portals, that we've got this stuff. Joe Primrage has got one of these things that's been back-engineered, and that goes to the important thing with my download, that when you get into the portal thing, then you start talking again about consciousness. You're not talking about big ships going at the speed of light, traveling through space. You're talking about ESP, what Ben Rich talked about, what Eric Walker talked about. You're talking about non-local consciousness, moving like an entangled particle through time and space. They're going through these portals. That's how they move. And that seems to be the important message, I think, that Ron and the people around Ron are trying to put out, is the idea that there's this consciousness linked to this thing, that it's multidimensional. It's going to be a lot less physical than people think. It's going to be a lot more spiritual than people think.
Where do you see CERN coming into play?
Well, I've heard these numerous stories about CERN and their stuff. I haven't really paid that much attention to it, because you need a source in there that's actually describing. The people that I'm dealing with are these high-level government people inside the U.S. government who are talking about this. For example, like Jim Semivan. When I first heard the portal story, I only heard the portal story, maybe 9 months ago, and I went, come on already, come on, portals, come on, this is nonsense. What are they trying to drag out here? And I knew they were talking about the story, but I didn't believe it. And then I got a phone call from a producer in California who's one of these people who's been asked indirectly by the CIA to do a documentary. And the documentary is going to be on the Avery. And the Avery was a group in the 1980s, these high-level intelligence people that Bill Moore used. He had contacts. And so they were going to do a documentary. They wanted this documentary, this story told about these Avery guys who are working on the UFO phenomenon. And it's a fascinating story. It's like these spy guys who are all have interacted with UFO phenomena at some point in their career. And then they suddenly realize all these other people are around, and they start linking up with each other. And they're all trying to put this thing together themselves because they've got a piece of the puzzle and they're trying to figure out what the other pieces are. So I got a phone call from a producer in L.A. who said, I've been told to contact you by U.S. intelligence. And I said, yeah, come on. I'm not even an American. Why would U.S. intelligence say for you to contact me? And he said, well, you know about the Avery. And I said, yeah, I've had interactions with these guys. I know the basic story. I dealt with Bill Moore, who sort of gave these guys all their names. And so they said, basically I was told, you're in. And I said, what do you mean I'm in? Well, you can be in on the calls. And this is this disclosure thing that they're going to, one of these programs, what they're going to do. And I said, well, I don't want to be in. And I didn't say to them, but basically it was, I'd rather be a chess player than a chess piece. Because once you're a chess piece, then they tell you what to do. So then I said to him, I said, well, they're putting out this stupid portal story. And he said, oh no, the portal thing's for real. I said, what do you mean it's for real? And he said, yeah, I've been through a portal, and he's now reporting in the last couple of weeks, he has seen one of the back engineer portals. And I know who this guy is. He's a producer in LA. And I'm going, are you kidding? The portal thing's for real? He said, yeah, the portal story's for real. And then Jim Semivan confirmed the portal story. And then so I suddenly got into this thing of why would they want this portal story out. And they're pretty serious about getting this thing out. Now, CERN has come up with the same thing, that they've been working on this. But from what I'm told is there's actually these actuators, and that this goes back into history, that they've recovered these actuators from history, that these things have been around quite a bit. And now we have actually one of the main players. I can't really get too much into this because it's not set up yet, but one of the main players is now going on the record, I think, with one of the major scientific journals in the United States. There's, again, a person who's a high-level writer for one of the scientific journals who's an experiencer. And that's what you need to find. You need to find the people in the government who are the experiencers, because they're not there to cover up. They're trying to figure it out the same as you and I. And when you talk to these people, and this is where I always warn people. People think there's these evil people in the government, and they get up every morning, and they put the picture of their children and grandchildren on their desk, and they say, well, I got to figure out how to destroy the world here. I got to destroy the world for my kids. Nothing could be further from the truth. These are just ordinary people. They may be deluded in what they're doing, in how they're doing it, but they actually think they're saving the world. And when you talk to these experiencer people, and I have a high-level guy in NASA, Jim Semivan I haven't talked to, but I know people around Jim Semivan. He's an experiencer. Then you have Ron Pandolfi's wife's an experiencer. Then you have this high-level guy from NASA. And to give you an example, somebody introduced him to me, and he had I'm talking to him at a cabin in Pennsylvania. I have no idea really who this guy is, except that he had sold a company for $100 million. And he starts telling me about his experience. He said, because I do downloads as well. People get downloads, whether it's musicians or experiencers. 42% of all experiencers are getting downloads of mathematical, technical, or scientific material. So I was interested in this guy because he's he's a controller at NASA. And he starts telling me about his story, how he made this money, how he made this company. And he said, the last thing I remember, the morning when I woke up that idea in my head, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of my bed. And of course, you asked the obvious question is, well, could you see its face? And the answer, if it's true, and it was true, he said, no, I couldn't see the face. You can never see the face on a hooded figure. And so he even told me stories like my daughter said to me, Dad, quit talking about this garbage. Quit talking about this. And he just said to me, he said, I just said to her, remember where the Lexus comes from. Because he'd made like a pile of money on this invention that he'd gotten, he'd put on the space shuttle, and he had got it from this hooded figure. And so you get these people, and you realize there's a lot of people in the government who are experiencers, who are getting this. And in fact, one of the stories that's told that I tell in the book, and I had this through two different sources over a couple of years. One of the guys that's involved is a guy by the name of Dr. Kit Green. Now, Ron Pandolfi has run the CIA, they call it the CIA Weird Desk, the UFO desk at the CIA, since 1983. But before 1983, Dr. Kit Green, he's a physiologist, doctor. He's at Wayne State University, I believe. So 69 to 83, he ran the Weird Desk. And what I was told the first person that told me, was a friend of Kit Green, who heard me mention Kit Green in one of the lectures. He said, I'm a friend of Kit Green's. I have dinner with him every 6 months. If you want me to ask him something. So I gave him some stuff, ask him about this, ask him about that. And then he'd come back, he'd meet me at a conference a year or 2 years later, and he'd say, I talked to Kit, and this is what he said about this or whatever. And he told me that Kit told him that when you're a high-level government official and you suddenly start talking about beings in your room or missing time, they send you to Kit Green. And they send you to Kit Green to find out, are you crazy? Because they put you in MRI machines and stuff stuff like that. And Kit Green investigates, and that I was told by this guy that Kit told him that he had 50 high-level government people who had come to him, that had been sent to him to find out whether they're experiencers or whether they're crazy. And if you follow the parapsychology stuff, you'll be aware that Annie Jacobson just put out a book. She's a New York Times or an LA editor who wrote a book on Area 51. She wrote the big book on Area 51, bestseller. She wrote a book on DARPA, which was was a runner-up for the Pulitzer Prize. She wrote on the German paperclip program, and then she just came out with a book called Phenomena, and she goes through all the various parapsychology stuff that have been done by the U.S. government over the years. Had all these inside people talking to her, and basically, she names off exactly the same people. The same Avery people that are in the UFO people. Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, John Alexander, all these same people, because it's phenomenology. It's all the same thing. So the people that are into the phenomenology that she's dealing with are into the UFO stuff. And she actually mentions, if you got the book, it's called Phenomena by Annie Jacobson. If you go from page 394 to page 400, she talks at length there about a long interview she had with Kit Green, and Kit Green has given other interviews to different people, where he describes the fact that he has a program, he has 100 people have been through the program, that he's investigating people who have had injuries with UFOs, and that they are doing genetic studies on these people, and they are doing MRIs of these people. And one of the things I heard from one of the people that is in the program, a good friend of mine, said that the genetic thing, that all experiencers, according to my friend, have a genetic marker that's there from birth. And the other thing is that, and Kit Green describes this, and he's working with a guy by the name of Gary Nolan at Stanford University, where they're talking about that all highly psychic people, and hang on, my phone is going off here. All highly psychic people and UFO people all have the same sort of brainwave pattern that they call the antenna. And this is the whole idea that the body, your hair, DNA, and bones all act as antennas, that we're senders and receivers. And so now we're getting into the UFO field where, and Kit Green's pretty open about what's happening here. You have a thing where it's no longer people just telling stories. Now you have MRI studies, you have stuff that you can actually reproduce, and we're moving into sort of another sort of area of investigation here.
I got a question on these portals. Would you also be, I mean, could they be named Stargates as well? I mean, is it, are we finding...
The word is always used as portal.
Okay.
I never heard Stargate, although if you look at the NASA literature, NASA basically confirms that there are portals. There's some papers that have been produced by NASA, but they don't use the word Stargate. The other word that's used, and we're actually going there right away, is to Mount Shasta. If you know the story with Paula Harris, Mount Shasta is a guy by the name of Ricardo, who he's from Peru, but he lives in Argentina. He's a contactee in South America, and he comes up to Mount Shasta every year, and he has this sort of big meditation thing for world peace and stuff like that. And some of the people I know go there, and they talk me into going. And 2 years, in 2014, 2015, Paula Harris was there, and there was this experience. There's this alien by the name of Antarel, and they do this thing, and he brings in Antarel, and on 2 occasions, Paula, who I know very well, and she really didn't tell the story until she told me, and I said, Paula, you're a public UFO person, you got to tell the story. That the being comes, and they pick 6 people to go in to have an encounter, and they call it a Zendra, not a portal, but a Zendra. And the way she described it was, everybody links hands, and you go in, and this sort of a white mist starts to appear on the ground, and you're to go through until you get to the other side of the white mist. You're not allowed to let go of anybody's hands, and once you get through the white mist, then this being appears. And I've heard Paula, and I've heard one other person who was part of this that saw this thing, describe it to me, and there's no doubt they saw what they saw, which is 9-foot-tall being. So I'm actually going there now, and I know Ricardo, so you never know. I may actually get to go through one of these Zendras. Nothing happened last year. The UFO flew by, but they didn't land last year. But so you have these different versions, and I'm not even too sure what they mean when they talk about portal. I mean, I just know that for a fact that the story I heard was that Joe Firmage had back engineered one of these portals. And Joe Firmage, if you know, was a .com executive, made a lot of money in the 1990s, and was fascinated with the UFO subject. If you're familiar with the Majestic 12 documents, the new Majestic 12 documents that were researched by Ryan and Bob Wood, it was all financed by Joe Firmage. He put up $250,000 to have these documents analyzed, and then put up money for a documentary. They put out a documentary on these documents. And then he lost a lot of his money, but he's still a pretty wealthy guy. And what I'm told is he does have an actual portal, like a built portal. So then you think it's built portal, but then they say, no, it's not. It could be animal, metal, or mineral. It could be anything. That's these actuators. To me, it's all still confusing. And that's where I wanted to get to one of the main people who's involved. And that's where I'm saying there's this development that has taken place where there's an interview that may take place where one of the people who controls one of these portals, who is very key person, rather than a puppet, an actual person that controls one of these things, can explain what this thing is, has agreed to talk about this. So that's what I'm hoping we can sort of clarify. But right now, I'm as confused as anybody else as to what this is all about, except that it involves interdimensions. That what I'm told is you need both sides. You can't just go through the portal. You need the other side. There's two gates. The other side has to allow you through. So you have their side and our side, and it the one that I guess I'm guessing the one that Firmage has. It sort of shimmers like a green color, and that Ron Pandolfi, who sort of alerted this producer where this portal was, he said you can go and look at it. He'll want you to go through it. Don't go through it. And so this producer has described this portal, and he's sort of on the record. His name is Kevin. He's on these .com meetings. He shows up at these .com meetings, or these go-to meetings, that are held on the internet by Ron Pandolfi's wife, and basically describes what he saw. And so that's basically what I know, and that the idea that it's an interdimensional type thing. It's like going into a dream world, and then there's some bizarre stories, which is maybe they're making it up, maybe they're not. Is one of the stories was that that's where Donald Trump came from. That before Trump was elected, that they went into the portal, and it's like you can manifest in the portal, and that they had actually manifested Trump to be the disclosure guy to come out. Now that's one of the more bizarre stories. But the thing is, it's not so much how bizarre the story is. It is told secondhand. It's told to a guy named Dan Smith by Ron Pandolfi. And I say all stories are going to be questionable, whether it's true, whether it's false. The most important thing is who's telling the story. Now, what I say is that if Ron Pandolfi is telling this story, it's an extremely important thing to listen to.
Let's talk about Trump. I believe Trump was not supposed to win. All right, and now since he's there, now I think I heard you say on another show that they wanted to show Trump this portal, and he declined.
Yep.
He declined. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if he declined. He was supposed to. This was this April 1st event. He was supposed to go to an island called St. Catharines, which is off of Georgia, and apparently some of the presidents have been through the portal there. That it was there, and this is like a movable portal. I always call it like a portal, and they can move this one around. And it was there, and April 1st he was supposed to go through it. So this was this thing where they were going to show him this portal, and of course nothing happened on April 1st, except that Ron Pandolfi went and actually posted. He posts as the Footman. That's one of the names. So if you see anything posted by the Footman, that's Ron Pandolfi. So he posts the fact that we're going to have a go-to meeting, and that's when he starts these meetings on April the 1st. So Trump, whether he declined the portal, we just know he didn't go through the portal. And then the other story that was told with this was that he was given a goodie bag. Now, this is if you know the history of disclosures. The story is he's supposed to be shown the portal. He's pro-disclosure, against disinformation. Ron Pandolfi is clearly predicted Trump was going to win long before he won. And this is where the explanation came that they actually knew because they basically picked him. So he doesn't go through the portal, and he's given this what he calls a goodie bag. And we're coming up on, we just passed the 70th anniversary. So this happens sort of on the 70th anniversary of the Roswell crash. And they seem to do this. It's like spies always use like codes, and they do these bizarre little things, like they're playing these little games. They like the game thing. So on the 70th anniversary, there's a story that Trump is given this goodie bag, which has UFO technology, small UFO technology in it, that he can show off to captains of industry to sort of keep them amused. And he approves the disclosure thing. He goes along with the disclosure thing, but he sort of stays out of it. And he's given this goodie bag in exchange. Well, the thing is, it's the same story as Chase Brandon, 2012, on the 65th anniversary of Roswell, where Chase Brandon, this guy who's the CIA liaison to Hollywood, he's no longer, he's still a consultant to Hollywood. So he's doing the same thing. Now he's in the black world, consulting Hollywood, in black CIA world, putting ideas into Hollywood. Then he was the white world. He was the second most powerful guy inside the CIA to speak publicly on behalf of the CIA. He goes on Coast to Coast and basically says Roswell was real. It was extraterrestrial and involved bodies. And the reason I know is because I was at Langley and I was in the collections division there, and I found this archives box that was sitting there. It had Roswell on the side, and I looked in, and there was all this material that confirmed to me that Roswell was real and it was extraterrestrial. It's the same story as Trump and the goodie bag. It's the same story. And if you go back to the 50th anniversary of Roswell, that's when Phil Corso came forward. It's the same story, except then it's not a goodie bag, it's not an archives box, then it's a filing cabinet. And he says, I just was working at the Army Research and Development, and I happened to find this stuff in a filing cabinet that nobody had seen. It was all this Roswell material, and I gave it to industry, and they developed, night vision and fiber optics and all that kind of stuff. So they're basically recycling this story through the years on the anniversary of Roswell, all that sort of stuff. So that's the Trump story. The latest Trump story is that he's busy doing other stuff. He's really not interested, and we know that. He's not interested in outer space. He was actually asked about Hillary Clinton. He was asked because Hillary's making all these things that she was going to disclose, and they asked him, well, what about Hillary and this disclosure stuff? And he said, well, I assume you're talking about outer space. I'm really not interested. And he really isn't interested. So that's the latest story, is that he's not interested, but he still has given authorization. And that makes sense according to what I know with the president, that the president has to authorize all this kind of stuff. Nothing happens unless the president authorizes it. So when you get Chase Brandon, this high-level CIA guy, come out and go on Coast to Coast in front of 4 million people or whatever the audience is, and say Roswell was real, and I've written this book that was reviewed by the CIA on 2 occasions, and they told me to change this, they told me to change that. When Chase Brandon comes out, there is no doubt that has been green-lighted by the president, because the president is in charge of the CIA, and if that story suddenly goes south, and suddenly becomes viral, and everybody goes after, you're responsible for the CIA. The president has to know this kind of stuff. And so what I see is that the president is dropping all these things. He's allowing people to leak this kind of material, to get it out, and Barack Obama, on a number of occasions, has leaked it. In fact, I was actually working on an article where I'm going to propose that the president may actually have disclosed, or may actually have declassified the UFO and Roswell situation. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, there's a story about Donald Trump talking about the fact that the U.S. is no longer going to finance the rebels in Syria. And the discussion immediately took place was that was Black Ops. That was a highly classified Black Ops operation, and that the president, by talking about it, had suddenly declassified the program. And this is what people don't realize. This is how stuff gets declassified. The stealth fighter was declassified because Jimmy Carter talked about it when he was getting reelected. That immediately declassified it. Ronald Reagan talked about financing the Libyan opposition. That declassified that. So what happens this is where this last 2-year period, since the end of 2015, the beginning of 2016, suddenly you get these teams that are trying to put this sort of story out. And what I'm proposing is that the president may actually have Obama may actually have declassified the subject. For example, when Area 51 was declassified, we know it was declassified. The reason it was declassified was because the day after John Podesta went to the White House to work for Barack Obama was giving an award to Shirley MacLaine at the Kennedy Center, and he stood up and he said, you know, when you become president, everybody always asks you about Area 51. And I didn't know what was going on, so I phoned up Shirley MacLaine. I had to find out what was going on at Area 51, and everybody laughs, and it's a big joke. And then Obama says, you know, I'm probably the first president to ever publicly talk about Area 51. At that moment, according to Andy Jacobson, Area 51 was declassified. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to dump all the documents. It just means it's declassified, and that if you start filing stuff, that it's opened up, that it gives the signal. In November of 2015, here's what happened. Hillary Clinton had been, the announcement had come out through John Podesta. He said to reporters, next time you interview Hillary, ask her about the aliens. And the question is, why would John Podesta put $1 billion campaign on the line to have reporters ask Hillary about the stupid UFO stuff, the aliens? I mean, this could just destroy the campaign. So he's asked the question, and Hillary's waiting for somebody to ask her the question. She's going on the Kimmel Show, November the 5th, 2015, and she's waiting for the UFO question. She doesn't get it, and when you saw the leak of the John Podesta emails, they were very upset. She'd practiced the answer. She didn't get the question. A couple of days after she doesn't get that question, Barack Obama gives an interview to GQ magazine, and he's asked about the Book of Secrets, about the fact, does the president know all the secrets? Does he have all this kind of stuff? And Obama says, you know, I always get asked about UFOs and that Roswell stuff. I just want to let you know that that top secret stuff is not as exciting as you think it is. So he basically says, yeah, this is for real. Roswell and UFOs is for real, and it's not as exciting as you think it is. And as I say, the reporter for the GQ magazine either had a stroke or fell asleep. Because his next question was, well, would you like to be a Supreme Court justice? He actually was handed the story and actually didn't go there. So when the president talks about UFOs in Roswell and basically confirms it, I indicate that it's a signal to people to get this thing going. And that's when these 6 teams started to put this material out. And I know people inside, these people that are involved with this thing, and what I'm told is it's not that they're experimenting. It's not like they're trying stuff. They actually have timelines. That the timeline is 3 to 4 years, and that they are basically putting this stuff out. The Tom DeLonge thing that he keeps delaying it, is a program which is involving $1 billion, from what I hear, maybe as much as $1 billion. It's going to be a pile of episodes. It's going to have Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams. It's going to be all this stuff in Hollywood, putting out these various stories. One of the richest people in the world has backed this. Last I heard, they had $200 million that had been gathered, and then Tom DeLonge had gone on Wall Street to gather the rest of the money, and that you have these massive programs, and that some high-level names are, Jim Semivan was one. I mean, he came forward and basically confirmed that, yes, he's an experiencer, he was a presidential briefer, was in the White House for a number of years, and so you're getting these movements that I've never seen in 42 years. In the last 2 years, the number of stories that I've heard, and even this latest one that I helped set up this interview, when I heard that this person had agreed to actually talk, I thought, man, I never thought I would see this day where this kind of stuff would be happening behind the scenes.
You think maybe that, I mean, this is like, that maybe the spiritual part has something to do with it? Like you were saying, it was like spiritual?
Can you speak up? I'm not picking up again for whatever reason.
You think it was? You were a little bit ago. You said it was like more spiritual than everybody thought. Do you think that might be like the reason why that everything's like coming up now?
Is it people are waking up? The spiritual thing. I think you mentioned. I think you mentioned a while back in another interview about demons and spiritual and people waking up. And is that the case right now? Is that what's happening to everybody?
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is the CIA, as I said, they're not stupid people. They're trying to save the world. They're doing what they think is right. And what they realize is the same as they've learned through Hollywood that Hollywood is going to do movies about the CIA, whether you like it or not. You cannot stop them. You can't kill everybody. And so what you do is you try to manage the story. So what you do is you go in there and you say, I'm your friend, I'll give you this story, and they nudge you in a certain direction. They're just trying to manage the story to move it in a certain direction because they know they can't stop the story. And that's what with the UFO situation is. It's gone so far, and there's so many people talking about it, and so many sort of leaks that they have to try. They can either try to kill everybody, or they can manage the story and make and spin it the way they want it to come out. And that's why they've sort of reached out. That's where, like I said, I got this phone call from this producer and said U.S. intelligence said to contact you. And I go like, come on, like, why? What the heck would they? And it's the whole deal is they want this documentary put out on the Avery, and they want to control. In fact, they suggested this thing on the Avery, and then there was a discussion: are we going to do it fictionally? Are we going to do it actually interviewing these people and do it like a documentary? And Ron Pandolfi, who was initiated this from the CIA, said, no, we've got enough fiction going on. We want actual interviews with these people. So they're actually sort of directing, this is how you're going to run this sort of thing. And they're got their hand in every paper in the United States. And it's not like they're running the paper, but they're sort of nudging. They've got certain people that can help them put out a message, and they're just trying to me, it's always managing. So one of the stories that we heard, for example, one of the teams, and we don't know, it's just one of the people inside believe this is one of the teams. One of the teams is that they're managing Stephen Greer, because Stephen Greer is a guy that you're not going to stop Stephen Greer. I mean, he's got all these people, he's got a lot of power, and he claims now to have, I think, 1,000 witnesses. So you can either go and try to kill all the 1,000 witnesses, or you can put witnesses in to talk to him and control the story that he's putting out. You got to try to control. Now, one of the stories I had heard, and this is from a very good source, and there was about 10 of us in the room when this person stood up and said this, and I picked up on it, said when he did the documentary Sirius, he was at the premiere in Los Angeles, and this person who was is on the credits for the documentary said that Stephen told her, oh, he was angry. He said, now I have to go back to Washington and I have to report to Ron at the UFO desk. And so when they started running these go-to meetings, what happens is they use a puppet. So Dan Smith is their puppet. So they leak this stuff to Dan Smith, and the way it works is the same thing as the plausible deniability to the president. Nobody knows anything. It's all plausible deniability. So he tells Dan Smith stuff, Ron Pandolfi, and Dan says, I either pick it up or I don't pick it up. He'll only say it one time. If I pick it up, that's fine. And you can go and ask him anything that he's told me in 26 years. He's been talking to me for 26 years. You can ask him, did you tell Dan this? He will deny everything he's ever said in 26 years. So you can talk about what he said. You just can't record him, and you can't reproduce his emails. So this is the plausible deniability. And that's how, so they're putting this stuff out. So he and Ron Pandolfi's wife run this go-to meeting. So what happens is he has the meeting, and I get in contact with a producer from Gaia. His name is Sid Goldberg. And I get Sid interested in the story. And Sid gets on this thing with me. And there's only like 14 people. People say, oh, I want to know what disclosure, I want to know what's going on. And when they have these meetings, like nobody shows up. I have a list. If anybody wants to be on the list, if you contact me at whitehouseuFO@gmail.com, I will put you on the list. And when they have a meeting, you can go on this thing, log on to this go-to meeting. You can ask questions. And so what happened in this second meeting that they had, Ron was in the room. Ron is never involved. His wife is running this thing, and we know Ron is in the room. He's just come in. They announced that he's in the room. So Sid Goldberg says, I just want to know, is Ron Pandolfi feeding material, or is he vetting material that Stephen Greer is putting out? And you hear Ron in the background say, what stories? So Sid repeats the question. Is Ron Pandolfi, is Stephen Greer reporting to Ron Pandolfi and having his stuff vetted through Ron Pandolfi? And just dead silence. And it goes on for like 10 seconds or whatever. And so suddenly someone says, I think you just got your answer. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, that I can name 24 people that Ron has helped, that he's interacted with. Willie Strieber, Bruce Maccabee, and this is one of the key stories. Bruce Maccabee, who's a Navy physicist who's done a lot of UFO research, does a lot of analysis on UFO documents and stuff. When the MJ-12 document was released in 1987, people say, oh, MJ-12 is not real. I said, well, explain this story then. When it's released at the MUFON conference in Washington, D.C. in May of 1987. Within hours of that, Ron Pandolfi gets one of the supporters of the document, Bruce Maccabee. He takes him to CIA headquarters, and he allows Bruce Maccabee to lecture on the MJ-12 document in the CIA to a standing room audience and talk about CIA documents. If you want this thing, if this is disinformation, the last thing you're going to do is take somebody in and actually lecture the people in the CIA. Ron had stated all these people started looking for documents. They were all looking for UFO documents, and it sort of turned the CIA sort of an uncontrollable thing where suddenly everybody realized this might be for real, and they started looking for documents. So that's the kind of stuff that Ron has worked with a number of people. That's where he made this sort of indirect contact to me, that you either control or manage the people who are running with the story, or you just let them control the story, and you don't control the story. The thing is to control the story as close as you can and get it to go in the direction you have, and you control the things you don't want people to know. So they don't want you to know about cattle mutilations. That's why when Linda Howe met with Richard Doty, if you know the story, back in 1983, Richard Doty offers her all this kind of stuff and gives her phony documents and stuff. If you realize the background to that, Linda Howe had done the documentary called Strange Harvest on cattle mutilations. She'd won an Emmy Award in Denver, and now she was a hot topic, and she was now going to do a documentary for HBO, which was big in the 1980s. And she was going to do this cattle mutilation thing on HBO. And the first thing Doty said to her when they had this meeting at Kirkland Air Force Base is, the government doesn't like your documentary on cattle mutilations. You shouldn't be doing this. And Linda, just too bad, this is what I'm doing. And so they set her up, and they killed the documentary. They offered her all this sort of stuff, and in the end, they killed the documentary. She lost that documentary because of her dealing with Richard Doty. So that if you get into that kind of stuff where they don't want you going down a certain subject, or the other one that I give the example of, if you get into nuclear weapons, if you start making the nuclear weapon connection, that's something you're never going to find documents, you're never going to find the government talking about, because that's something they really don't want you to know. If they can shut down Malmstrom and 10 weapons, and 10 nuclear weapons, they'll say, oh, no, we didn't study it. No. We really don't want to know how to shut down nuclear missiles. If we, know how to shut down the Russian nuclear missiles, no, we're not interested in that. We didn't do an investigation. That is one of the key things they're looking at. Because if you can shut down the Russian nuclear missiles, the same as they did at Malmstrom in 1967, then you have technology. So what happens is, you have the story of Paul Bennewitz. And this is a story about the government is disinformation and all this kind of stuff. If you realize what happened, Paul Bennewitz is in 1982, is making these reports. He's a scientist outside of Kirkland Air Force Base, and he's reporting UFOs flying over the Manzano Weapons Storage Area. The Manzano Weapons Storage Area in 1982 was the biggest repository of nuclear weapons in the world. They don't want that story. You don't want people knowing that there are UFOs on top, flying around the nuclear missiles, the biggest repository of nuclear missiles in the United States. So they have to run them. They have to run this disinformation program and make him look like he's crazy. And that's when they bring in the counterintelligence people. So there's certain subjects they really don't want you to touch, but there are certain subjects like the portal and this consciousness thing that they're just happy to provide interviews and to try to put this sort of story out. So they're managing the story, and the more I look at it, the more I see they're just people who have a very difficult situation. Kit Green actually made a statement at one point. He said, what would you do if you had to deal with this situation? It's fine to sit on the outside and to say, okay, you should do this, you should do that. But if you're suddenly the person who has to make the disclosure and your head is on the block, what are you going to do to handle it? And when you look at these people inside, and I know some of them, I suddenly realize that they're just ordinary people who are doing the best they can with a very, very difficult situation where a lot of things could go wrong. And in the book, Managing Magic, I go through 64 reasons why they've decided not to tell you the truth. And when you look at the 64 reasons, I think most people would say, drill another oil well. Because who wants to be on top of all these things that could go wrong? It may not go wrong, but there's so many unpredictable things that are involved that if you're a politician, you don't want the president being put in a position where he's going, well, I don't have the answer. No, I don't. The president is supposed to be Superman. He knows everything. He's got everything under control. And you're going to put him in a position where we really don't have any control over any of this stuff. They're flying around. They can do what they want. And, we don't need oil and all this kind of stuff. And that it's interdimensional. There's no physical world. There's so many things that people really haven't thought about.
Then I have a question. Okay, so if these UFOs are so interested in our nuclear weapons and they're monitoring what's happening, people fear Russia and the United States will one of these days go at it in a nuclear war. If the aliens are so interested, then I feel that if we were to start something, or Russia would start something, then the aliens would put a stop to it?
That's what I'm told. When I had my first sighting, when I did the Charlie Red Star book, and nobody would publish the book, my father was a pilot for the Canadian government, and there was a guy in his office who was a radar tech, and he'd had a sighting in the Carmen area, nothing major. And he came up, and this is where I sort of, and again, was this accident or was this synchronicity? And he said, if you really want to know what was going on with UFOs, you should study what the Canadian government was doing. I used to work for the guy who ran the Canadian government flying saucer program. And I go, you did? I couldn't believe this. It's some guy in my father's office, and there was only like 5 people working on this program, and he was one of them. And he said, yeah, I was a young engineer. He used to change the tapes in the Flying Saucer Observatory that they had in Ottawa, Canada, and stuff. And so I started to investigate the Canadian government, what they had done. And that's where I came across the consciousness connection. That the guy who ran it, his name was Wilbert Smith. He was a radio engineer, top radio engineer, and he was the guy who was negotiating with the Americans on FM stations when they were putting in FM stations. And he was in the United States an awful lot, very powerful guy, and actually ran Radio Ottawa, where they were trying to pick off Russian communications. It was like the NSA of Canada. He ran it. And so I started to investigate this story of his involvement in this UFO thing. What I discovered was the guy was an experiencer. He was actually in contact with an alien by the name of Alpha, and they were actually going to land this thing in 1954. Paul Hellyer actually tells this story in 1967 in a speech, that the Canadian government was going to land a UFO at Suffield, Alberta, which was a top-secret Army base where they'd done nerve gas experiments and stuff like that. And so I go after Wilbur Smith, and I get all his documents. I realize this guy's a contactee. He wrote a book called The New Science, which was the aliens describing to him how the universe worked in all sorts of mathematical terms and stuff like that. And what he said, that he had been told by Alpha. There was two aliens. There was one by the name of Alpha, and one was by the name of Tyla. And the CIA was actually in contact with this Alpha as well. This is a story they leaked about a channeling session the CIA did in 1959 with this alien by the name of Alpha. But Smith was in contact with Alpha, and he said that he had been told by Alpha that this non-intervention thing, that they are not to interfere with the universe, that Alpha had said, if there is a nuclear exchange, they will step in and stop it, and that they can do it, and that they could prove to the world that they could do it. They could take the moon in front of the entire world. They could split the moon in half, and they could put it back together in microseconds in front of the entire world to show that if there was a nuclear exchange, they could stop it. But other than a nuclear exchange, they will not step in. And the words they used was, we will allow the world to stew in its own juices. So you have to learn your lessons. They can't come in. They can't do all this kind of stuff. But they're just horrified by this nuclear weapon thing, where a number of experiences have been shown. The effect where this wave goes out through the universe. And if everything is one, if everything's connected, everything is in time and space is connected, then what you do here, you do all through the universe. It's not like we have this idea that everything is random particles in time and space, and what we do here doesn't affect everything else. But if you understand, even the guy who came up with the idea of portals and stargates was Wheeler. And Wheeler said, basically, there's only one electron. Until you measure there's only one electron, it's a participatory universe. It's all connected. And so this is this concept that what we do here affects the rest of the universe. And that's why they showed up at the end of World War II in massive numbers is because we detonated the atomic bomb, and the signal went through the entire universe that these people are on the edge, that you got to go there, and these people almost like now. Like one reporter said to me, well, what are they bugging us for? Why are they going bug North Korea? I mean, and I said, well, I mean, exactly. We're afraid of North Korea. There's all this thing, oh, like North Korea's going to do this, they're going to do that. These crazy people, they've got this nuclear weapon, and they haven't killed anybody yet with their nuclear weapons.
Right.
We killed 125,000 people with 2 nuclear weapons. So you can see what kind of threat that we might be seeing in the universe. In fact, some people don't know. When I started researching this, what I found is some of the crazy stuff that gets classified, and Andy Jacobson talks about this, that people don't know about. For example, did you know that Teller, who invented the hydrogen bomb, and a guy by the name of Herb York, who was the first director of DARPA, actually had on the drawing board a nuclear weapon that was 10,000 megatons. They were going to build a weapon that was 10,000 megatons, which, to give you an idea of what they described, it could take out the entire east coast of the United States, or in another analogy, it could light the entire state of California on fire. They had this on the plan, and so they withdrew it. But the question is, what kind of crazy stuff have we got on the drawing boards that's classified that you don't know about? What have they built that the aliens know about that we don't know about what's going on? And I think the aliens basically, to me, it's all messaging. 100% of what's going on is messaging. They're basically, this nuclear weapon is not the biggest thing anymore. The biggest message that 54% of experiencers who filled out the survey, the free did the 4,000 experiencers, 675 questions or whatever it was. The number one thing that people seem to be talking about is the oneness, to realize that everything is connected, that we are all one, and that when you realize everything's one, then there'll be no more war. If you believe that there's me and you, good and bad, then you're going to go at war, and you're never going to stop going to war, and you're going to try to steal other people's stuff. But if you understand everything's one, war and evil and all that kind of stuff stops. So that's the number one message. And then nuclear weapons isn't the biggest one anymore. The biggest one is 39% of all experiencers who are shown the screen on board the ship, which shows the environmental devastation of what they assume to be Gaia. So those are the things. I'd say it's straight messaging. If you look at the alien thing, where I say it's going to be a lot less physical than you think it is, people say, well, they're physical aliens, they're here. Well, they're coming through portals, and a lot of people will describe the number one being that is described is not a gray alien, it's not an alien, it's a ball of light, it's an etheric being. And a lot of people will describe, Stephen Greer described, piles of people describe this fact, that a ball of light turns into an alien. And so the thing is it a ball of light that eats bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning, or is it a physical alien? Or can it go from, is it in this sort of etheric realm, and they can manifest themselves into physical for a certain period of time, and then go back into that realm? If you look at the aliens, you can see that there's almost nothing physical about them at all. For example, they basically, people say they're here to steal our gold. I say, if they're here to steal our gold, why has no experiencer ever described an alien with jewelry? There's no aliens with jewelry. There's no aliens with designer clothes. There's no fancy furniture on the craft. It's basically like a beehive. It's basically like a system where everybody's doing their job. There's really nothing physical. You don't really see aliens eating. You don't see them sleeping. They're basically just sort of working, and it's so much, you can start looking at it, there's really nothing physical. They don't seem to be interested in any of our physical stuff. They're more into these messages, this messaging that we are at this pinnacle or this crux of humanity where we may destroy ourselves, or we move to the sort of the next level.
So we're talking the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. I mean,
yeah. I mean, all that stuff. That and I didn't really get into that. I think
right.
Linda Howe had a source that said that was fed by the CIA. So they're putting these kind of messages in through movies that they're giving us these warnings that they're concerned with what we're doing, and we sort of turn it into this physical thing. It's like a lot of people will say, well, I'm really not interested in that. Like, why don't they just land, give us the free energy devices, and then get lost? It's like we look at it like a physical thing, and we sort of project our own mentality. So we say, if we were there, we'd go and steal the gold. If we were there, we would invade the planet. And they're not on that level. They're more... and that's one of the reasons maybe they're not going to disclose, is because if you look at it very closely, People, I'm going to write. I'm doing some YouTube things. I'm going to answer the question: are they commies? No, but they're pretty close. They are not capitalists. They are about as far from capitalists.
I think they're
called the hype
after.
mentality.
I don't
There's
think
really
they're.
nothing. Everybody's doing their job. There are no rich people, poor people. Everybody's the same. Everybody's just doing their job. And that kind of stuff, if it gets into the American society, that these people really aren't interested in physical stuff, that they are basically like a commune or a kibbutz or something like that, where everybody's equal, everybody's one, this idea of oneness, all working towards the benefit of the one. That's something that's not going to go over well in America, because in America, it's still the capitalist, rape, pillage, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. And people look at aliens as if, what are they here? And it's like, I make the point. You're confusing them with Santa Claus. This is not Santa Claus. They're not here to bring us toys. They're here for a very different reason, but people have this sort of idea.
Why are they here?
They're here to bring us stuff.
Why are they here?
I don't think they
Well,
ever
as
left.
I said, there's three main messages. The number one message they seem to put across, I'm helping, there's a woman by the name of Nancy Tremaine who's putting out a book that we're helping her publish her book. Her number one thing is oneness. If you want to know who we are, look in the mirror. We're all one. It's this concept of non-locality, consciousness. Everything's one. There is only one electron. It's all connected. It's all one. There is no separation. The minute you have separation and go between you and me and we're separate particles, you're making a mistake. It's all going back to quantum physics, that there's this entangled particle thing. Everything's connected to everything else. And what you do to someone else, you do to yourself. Sherry Wild is another experiencer who has very clear recollection. She was shown by the aliens this oneness concept. She was taken and she was showing her father sitting at a kitchen table, and she said, "Why are you showing me this? What are you showing me this for?" And they said, "Just watch, Sherry, just watch." And her father picks up this fork, and with his right hand, and he drives this fork into his left hand, and the blood is shooting up all over the place. She said, "What are you showing me that for? What are you showing me that for?" And they said, "Sherry, this is the lesson of oneness. What you do to someone else, you might as well do to yourself." And in all the big experiencers, whether it's Betty Andreasen, who had 6 books, she's doing her 6th book. She talks about the one. She gets to meet the one. It's this one concept that will change everything. If you realize everything's connected, everything's one. That's their main one. But again, their messaging on this environmental thing. 39% of all experiencers are shown this message about this devastation of the world, and said, you've got this mission, and people really don't know what it is, but they think there's something's about to happen, and or you get one of the messages was given to me in these bizarre synchronicity things is I was contacted by an experiencer who his name is Chris Bledsoe, who Warner Brothers is going to do his story. They're going to throw $80 million. It's an incredible story of experience and encounters, high-level people, President of the United States. All these people are watching this guy, very, very clearly watching this guy. He contacts me, this is back a number of years ago, and he said, "Grant, I got a message from the aliens. They've got a message for you. And the message is in the music." And I go, "Okay, fine and good, but you're talking to the wrong guy. Grant Cameron ain't interested in music. Grant Cameron's never listened to music. I have no interest in music whatsoever." And he said, "Well, the 2 songs that I'm pretty sure they told me that are connected are Kashmir by Led Zeppelin and After the Gold Rush by Neil Young." And I go, "Neil Young, are you kidding? It was Neil Young?" And he said, "Yeah, it was Neil Young." And I said, "Oh, cool. He grew up in my city. I live in a city that nobody even knows what it is, but I know Neil Young and a number of famous musicians grew up. If it hadn't been for that, I never would have gone down this road." Neil Young writes After the Gold Rush. If you look at the lyrics, it's the lyrics of the experiencer. It says, "We're treating the world like a gold rush. When the gold is gone, it's going to become a ghost town. And the silver seeds, the flying saucers, are going to come down, and they're going to take the chosen ones," which is what Yvonne Smith calls the experiencers, the abductees. Going to take the chosen ones to a different planet. And then you start seeing all the high-level musicians who are experiencers, Thom Yorke, Patti Smith, all these various people all start singing the same song. They don't know why they're singing it, but they start singing this song After the Gold Rush, this sort of experiencer message. So that is one of the key messages that they basically have. The oneness message, the nuclear weapon one, which was really big in the 1950s, like Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian government program, was adamant. He was after the Canadian government. He was saying, you don't realize that when you detonate an atomic bomb, that there's a wave that goes down through the Earth. Not only is it going up, but it's going down through the Earth, and it comes out the other side of the Earth. And he called it waves or areas of reduced binding. And he was claiming in the 1950s that there were planes that were crashing because they were flying through these areas of reduced binding that we were being caused by nuclear weapons. You got to remember, this is the guy that ran the Canadian government UFO program, and that there was a top secret document. It's the only legitimate, real high-level top secret document is the Canadian top secret document, where Wilbur Smith goes through the Canadian Embassy, goes through the military attaché in Washington at the Canadian Embassy, and he asked the Americans in September and October of 1950, what's the deal with flying saucers? We Canadians, we think that we can create, they're using the magnetic field of the Earth for propulsion. We want to work on this. And the Americans tell the Canadians, and this is in this top secret document that Smith reports back to the Department of Transport, flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated 2 points higher than the hydrogen bomb. Small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush is trying to figure out the modus operandi. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And then the very next line in the document, and remember, this is written in November of 1950, before anybody has been abducted, before anybody has said they've talked to an alien, Adamski and all these guys. It says, we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And the Americans aren't doing very well because they said if we're working on it, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So in 1950, the Americans told the Canadians already that mental phenomena was involved. How did they know that? Nobody had talked to an alien. Now we know aliens are telepathic. Now we know that when there's 13% of experiencers, when you talk, and those are the people you got to talk to. Forget about lights in the sky. Forget about what the government says. The experiencers are the people who are interacting with this phenomena, and they have to be listened to. 13% of all experiencers say they've flown the ship. And I can guarantee you, when they say they've flown the ship, you say, hang on, how do you fly a flying saucer? Everybody, I've talked to 36 people, everybody said the same thing. Oh, you do, you fly it with your mind. So the Canadians were told in 1950 that mental phenomena was part of the flying saucer phenomena. It's mental. That's how you fly the thing. You become one with the craft. You put your hand on this pad, you become one with the craft, and then you think. You think, I want to go here, I want to go there. It's like a portal. You move here, there, like an entangled particle in space. You don't fly, and the craft is alive. You become one with the craft. And so it's this mental phenomena thing that the American government has known about from the word go. So they've understood this. They just haven't been able to get this material until Ben Rich comes forward and says, we now have the technology to take ET home. We've discovered the mistake in the equation. And when he's asked, how does it work? He says, what do you know about ESP? ESP is non-local consciousness. It means everything's connected. There is no time, there is no space. Everything's one, everything's connected. So that's your basic message, and that's how they get here. And once you understand the primacy of consciousness in this whole phenomenon, and that's when you start to understand what's actually going on. And other people have been told, if you're following the Tom DeLonge story, Tom DeLonge goes to Area 51, and now Ben Rich is long dead and gone. He's talking to Robert Weiss and the head scientist at Lockheed Skunk Works at Area 51. And he says to them, they say, how do you think they get here? And Tom says, oh, okay, he gives them an idea. And they say, well, it's a pretty good idea. What else? And he says, I think consciousness is involved. And the head scientist for Lockheed Skunk Works says, now you're talking. And he sits down, and he said, it's all the guy wanted to talk about. They had a 45-minute talk on consciousness. That's all the guy wanted to talk about. Consciousness is a critically important component, and the whole thing is all messaging. It's them arriving at a point in time where we've sort of come up against the fact we may destroy ourselves. We've learned the atomic bomb secrets. We've learned entangled particles, and they're trying to help us over this hump and get us down the road without us destroying ourselves.
So Grant, where does aliens and religion come into play? This is going to be the last question because it's like we're an hour and a half already done. I mean, this is crazy, but
okay.
But God, okay, God, is there a God? Where does all this fall into place? I mean, because I believe in a higher power, but now you're pretty much saying that there are aliens out there. Where do they come from? Did God, make them? You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, there is. I mean, basically, all you have is consciousness. If you break it down to the dual slit experiment, a particle does not take a position in time and space until there is a consciousness, until there's an observer. So consciousness is primary. The ground of being, everything is consciousness. So consciousness is whatever you call it, God, the source of the universe, whatever you want. When it vibrates, when it starts to move, and everything is vibration, when it starts to move, the physical world starts to come into being. So people will say, if it vibrates, it's illusion. The whole thing is illusion. If you get into lucid dream research and stuff like that, it's all the same thing. So aliens, I don't really believe. I believe they're more, I would call them ultra-terrestrials. They're more than physical beings. They are people who have learned to go to the next level, and they're sort of etheric type beings. The ones that are physical, like you and I, who don't understand the connection, the oneness connection, are still stuck on their planets. The only ones that are coming here are the ones that have learned this connection of oneness, that it's all consciousness. That's how they're moving around. It's all the consciousness. And when you break it all down, there is no physical universe. It's all consciousness. It's all God. It's God expressing itself. It's that sort of thing. So it's going back to the very beginning and defining the fact that the physical is secondary to this consciousness, which would be the definition of God.
Doesn't it sound like a little bit boring, though? Like no art, no jewelry, no music, no... I mean, like, boring. But so you get to fly around.
We've gotten mesmerized by the shiny objects. I mean, we're living in this material world where we believe, you know, if you don't have something new. That's why I said a lot of people, when it comes to UFOs, all they want is like, just tell us what's going on. Don't give me all this crap. And they're in the 1900s. What we did for entertainment is we brought in people to do seances, like at the White House. They bring people in to do seances to entertain us. For most people, this is just entertainment. They just want, you know, we got the 2 cars, we got the big house. We just need something to entertain ourselves rather than TV. And they don't understand the basic concept is that in the end, everybody's going to die. And that material stuff's going to go away. And then you realize that reincarnation, which a lot of people leave out of this whole story, is that if reincarnation is a fact, and it does seem to be a fact, that you're just cycling through. And that you've come in here, you've made an agreement to do something, to learn something, to do whatever, that we're working on this pattern, and that the physical stuff is you know, kind of interesting. But we're living in a Western world where people have these toys, and people really aren't as happy as they think it are. I work at a homeless shelter, and I can tell you, people at a homeless shelter are a lot happier than the people that have all the toys. I mean, you see it sort of backwards, but
right. No, I understand.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from it, but it's that's why it's not going to go over well in the American society when it's suddenly made aware that this is basically like a communist system, that these guys are working like, it's called a hive mentality. It's basically, that's the way it looks. And everybody's just sort of doing a job, and everybody's just trying to make a better world, and knowledge becomes more important than the trinkets, the things. Everybody's just trying to improve the sort of the world of the universe.
Is there crop circles? Is that their art, or is that a message?
What is that?
The crop circles, is that an art, or is that messages?
Well, crop circles, again, it's messaging. If you understand how it worked, there was these 2 people in 1975 who met the beings that said, we're going to put a crop circle in this field, and we own the field. And then if you look at Colin Andrews, who was the main guy, you look at this thing, is this accident or synchronicity? Colin Andrews, who discovered the first crop circle, who got this whole thing going, who has the biggest catalog, you realize that when this thing starts in 1976, he has got a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and that he's pulling his first time he's ever played this reel-to-reel tape recorder. He's an expert on communication. He's pulling this microphone across the carpet, and as he's doing that, and turns on the tape recorder, the screen goes blank, and this alien comes on the screen on British TV and starts this message about, you know, we're here and you're doing this to the planet, and all this sort of stuff. And he tapes the whole thing, and so you see this whole pattern that it's not random. If you talk to Colin Andrews, he'll tell you it's not random either. He got a message when he was doing the X conference thing to say he's in the shower and he gets this message in his head and says, okay, it's time for you to tell them. And he says, I know exactly what they were talking about. They didn't have to tell me what I was to talk about. He was to talk about the fact that he's an abductee, that his whole life he's been in, and he said, my career is over. I'm the crop circle guy, I'm the engineer, I'm the scientist guy. If I tell everybody I've been abducted, I mean, my career is over. And then the voice in his head says, no, timing is everything. The time has come when you've got to say this. And so he says, okay, I'm going to do it. He's going to come public and say, there's more to this crop circle thing than just crop circles. I'm part of this thing, and I was told to do this. And then he comes up to give the lecture in Washington at the X conference, and a guy walks up to him and says, you know, you have to do this, don't you? And Colin Sagan was just floored. This guy actually knew what he was going to do, and he'd never mentioned it to anybody. And you see these synchronicities in this whole thing, that crop circles, it's messages. They're giving messages, and one of the messages they have, if you look at Chris Bledsoe, this famous friend of mine, he shows me a picture of his beings that he deals with, the ones that gave me the message about the music, and he shows me this painting that he did of them. And I look at it, I go, that painting looks pretty familiar. Like, oh man, I've seen that before. And he had it in storage. He never brought it out because his wife wouldn't let him put it on the wall. And so I'm the first person ever to see this painting. And he shows me the painting, and then suddenly I realize it's in the 2002 crop circle in the United Kingdom, the one that has the sort of the disc that says "Beware of false promises. There's still time. Conduit closing."
Yeah.
And that's the message that Chris has gotten, is that when they bring out the message, they're going to mess the message up and make it into evil aliens. And it's his alien. It's exactly his alien. It's got the same pattern, the same shadow under the eyes. It's identical to the alien at Chris Bledsoe. So you're going like, is this random that he just happened to draw an alien that appeared in a crop circle? And you see this kind of stuff where Colin Andrews will say, not only did they create the crop circles that were put down, they created the crop circles that were hoaxed. And he goes through all the hoaxers that Rockefeller financed this research. They did all the guys that did the hoaxes, and they said that these ideas were coming in their head, what to put down, and they didn't know where the ideas were coming from. So Colin Andrews will say the aliens were making the crop circles, and they were making the hoax crop circles as well.
Whoa.
So it's very, very complex.
Wow.
But I would say it's all messaging, it's all connected, it's all one. We're just following this pattern. Reincarnation is a fact. We're playing this role, and the only thing that matters is, what is our role? Why did we come here? What are we supposed to do in this sort of thing? So I think that I'm not here by random accident doing this. You're not having your radio show by random accident. This is part of what you have. It's not accidental. It's not random. It's all part of a process, and you do it the best you can, and let the rest sort of shake out in the wash.
I agree. All right, Grant, let's tell everybody about your website. You started the President's UFO website.
Yeah, I did the President's UFO website, although I haven't posted anything on there for quite a while.
Okay.
I have a White House UFO YouTube site that I'm going to post a lot of stuff on.
Okay.
I'm going to put short answers to various questions, some as you were doing tonight, and I have a number of books. I have my Amazon page. If they go to Grant Cameron at Amazon, my author page, they'll see a number of the stories I've done on inspiration, downloads, on the Managing Magic, and the latest book, which is this Charlie Red Star book about how I got dragged into this thing in 1975.
The Magic book. What's the title of that one again?
It's called Managing Magic, the
Managing
Government's
Magic.
UFO Disclosure Plan.
That one, I got to get that
Me
one.
too. I'm going to get that one.
Yeah, okay. All right, Grant, I appreciate you coming on and talking for an hour and a half with no breaks. I appreciate that. I'm pretty sure you're tired and your voice is done, but a lot of information, a lot of the stuff that we were hoping you were going to spill, you did tonight. I can't wait for Tom DeLonge and to see what he has coming out in the near future. What do you think? When do you think that's going to happen?
Well, it's supposed to happen any day. The last I heard, he said 3 weeks, and that was more than 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
It's got to do with money. What he's going to announce is going to be a program of To the Stars, which is his media corporation. He's going to put out a bunch of stuff, and it's all financed in terms of series. It's going to run for 5 years. It's going to have the toys, the trilogy thing where it's all going to be tied in, and some big name people are going to be brought out, and there's $6 million that I heard that was associated with Jacques Vallée that they're going to data mine. So people, when these shows are shown, people can send in UFO sightings, and they're going to, Jacques Vallée is going to go through all this material and data mine for patterns in the UFO sightings.
So it's just going to be nothing but UFO stuff then?
Yeah, this is going to be UFO stuff, but he's going to do the consciousness thing, which I think
Okay.
is very important.
Okay.
He has the same role that he has said. This is the critically important part to the whole thing, is the connection to consciousness. The consciousness is the ground of being. Consciousness is primary to the physical universe. And when you understand consciousness, the oneness, everything's connected, then you start to understand what these beings are and how they get here and how the propulsion system works.
Awesome. Well, Grant Cameron, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you very soon, okay?
I appreciate your interest.
Not a problem. Thank you, Grant. Good night.
Take it easy, Grant.
All right. Well, an hour and a half nonstop, no commercials. There's a lot of information he threw at us. For those we had him last year, I think it was, and I knew this is the type of guy where you just let him go.
Yep.
You let him go. You might throw a couple of things in there to stir the direction you want something answered, but otherwise you don't want to stop him because he might say something that he was not able to say. You know what I'm saying?
Like if you put him in a different direction,
yeah,
then we miss the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
wanted to ask about.
Oh, hold on. Sorry. Okay, go.
I wanted to ask about the Portal Zendra and the Mount Shasta stuff.
That
could totally be another 2 hours.
It probably is.
Yeah.
We probably should have him back. We should see if he'll come back and do another one.
I'm sure he would. And
I had a bunch of questions.
Oh,
I know.
I was like,
yeah, it's a lot of people who don't know who Grant is. I was getting questions coming up. Who is this guy? Is he legit? He is. He's in there with Bassett, with James Fox, with Litton Moulton Howell, with Strieber. He's in with all that. Okay, you guys. This guy is in the know-how. He's always been in the know-how. So yeah, that magic book that I think I'm going to get that one because that's definitely up my alley. But he pretty much confirmed about the movies and their disclosure here, a little bit there. They're never going to tell you exactly what's going on, but they want to give you as much as they can.
I wanted to ask him about Nibiru.
Yeah, you know what?
And this planet coming in, and when he started talking about global warming,
Well, when he was talking about aliens coming in and disrupting a world war with nuclear weapons, would that happen if we were to get hit by debris or by asteroids? Would they come in and help us and shoot them out of the sky?
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because if they're going to help us with the nuclear weapons, then why not that way?
Well, I don't think they're helping us with nuclear weapons. I think that when
they're watching us.
When we blow one up,
Uh-huh.
it splits an atom. Okay, so that means it's blowing up atoms in other dimensions. So if they're near it, they get blown up too. So they're like, hey, dude,
You said the thing about the electrons.
Right, yeah. It knocks their electrons to, plutonium. Pluto.
I didn't think about
anus.
that.
No.
Whoa. Okay, well, that's it. God, there was some other stuff that I wanted to talk about, but obviously we're out of time. It's already 15 after the hour. Next week, I already have another guest lined up. We're going to segue off of UFOs and talk about, I'm not going to say what, but we talked about it tonight. Alan was talking about it, and so we're going to segue. We're going to keep this topic going, and she is really famous in her field, and a lot of people are going to enjoy this, and that's all I'm going to say. All right? So, for Jeffrey Gonzalez, Alan Thomas, and Mr. Neon the Unknown, Ryan, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Grant Cameron, for coming on and talking for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes with no breaks. I appreciate it. Hope you all have a good night and take care. We'll see you next Sunday. Bye.
Bye.